Before you decide what you think about functional patterns or what you think about me, I want you to hear this from the start. This video is not an attack, it's not a takedown, and it's not about exposing anyone. It's about what happens when something genuinely helps you and then ends up asking for more than you're willing to give. If you're here because FP has helped you, then this video is for you. If you're here because you're thinking about starting FP as a consumer or as a practitioner, then this video is especially for you. And if you're here because you've had a bad experience with FP or you're ready to argue in the comment section, I really ask that you take some time to think about what you're going to say before you say it. And I ask that you finish this video. Like a lot of people I talk to, functional patterns didn't enter my life as an idea or an ideology. It entered as a last resort. By the time I truly committed to FP, I wasn't curious, I was desperate. I was in pain that didn't make sense, pain that didn't respond to the usual routes. Doctors, scans, generic rehab, strength work, and medication, none of them joined the dots. What I felt in my body didn't match the explanations I was being given. What drew me to functional patterns wasn't the marketing, it was the hope that it gave me. The idea that pain wasn't random, that posture, pressure, and movement history mattered. It all made sense to me. In fact, despite trying various techniques to correct my posture and improve my overall strength, I always felt like something was missing until functional patterns. I'd followed FP from the start of my fitness education in 2014, but I never took the plunge until I was in chronic pain and I had no answers. I really got stuck into the 10-week course, and it was refreshing that a company was thinking about the body as a system rather than a collection of parts. I didn't just dabble in it, I committed fully. I stripped things back, I followed the process, and it worked until week 7 when I got stuck. At that point, I didn't hesitate to work with a very skilled practitioner online. And over time, working with the practitioner and learning the 10-week course, my pain reduced and my awareness improved. My posture felt stronger, and the way that I understood my body fundamentally shifted. Functional patterns didn't just give me exercises, it gave me a framework for thinking. That framework has helped me get my life back. So much so that after being told in 2020 that I would never run again, to being able to run a half marathon in 2024, completely pain-free, it was truly immense. Now, whilst that marathon was a pain-free race, and my joints were fine and my body felt okay, there was still something wrong with me, and I'll get onto that later. But it's important for me to say this clearly. Functional patterns played a huge role in taking my pain from a 10 to a 0, and I'm genuinely grateful for that. Because of that success, I went deeper. I trained with practitioners, I invested in FP's online courses, all of them. I bought several FP products, and I invested in the Human Foundation's practitioner course. I even renewed my license twice to keep my practitioner status. I didn't just believe in the methodology, I lived the methodology. For a long time, that felt great. What I noticed at first wasn't physical, it was actually psychological. At the beginning, cutting out all my other training felt disciplined, it felt good-natured, and it felt sensible. I told myself it was temporary. In fact, one of my videos, I think I said I'd give it 5 years. And in many ways, it helped. But over time, something subtle started to change. I realized that I'd stopped doing things that I loved to do, things that gave me fulfillment, things that actually gave me a connection to other people in my life. This didn't feel like when I stopped drinking, smoking weed, or smoking cigarettes and eating too much. It didn't feel like when I left my job in London and started to pursue a new career and a new life in the Midlands in the UK. This felt like I'd isolated myself. Running became something that I questioned, playing sport felt irresponsible, and training socially just felt wrong. It didn't feel wrong because of my body not being able to do it. It felt wrong because I'd simply internalized the idea that anything outside FP was a threat to my progress and functionality. I put a large part of that down to being given strict instructions by Naudi and his followers. Don't do anything other than FP. At the same time, my relationship with the fitness industry shifted. I became hypercritical and I lost my pragmatic nature, but replaced it with cynicism. I found myself silently and openly judging people's movement, judging people's posture, judging their classes, even people enjoying themselves. And not because they were doing anything harmful, but because they just weren't doing functional patterns. I felt guilty about the idea of playing golf again. And not only that, I grew more and more concerned about how sharing my recovery and showing myself playing golf and doing other sports would be viewed by functional patterns as a company and as a brand. I realized This wasn't who I wanted to be. The big turning point for me and what really stood out was the environment around FP. And I noticed this the most when Naudi took himself off social media in a dramatic exit worthy of an Oscar-winning performance. At the time, he claimed that the platforms were too toxic and that his time for being online was limited. He wanted to move over to LinkedIn. And in that time that he wasn't online, I noticed that I felt better. I felt better for not listening to him every single day. And I certainly didn't miss his reaction videos when he was off social media, but then he came back. Every video he ever put up just felt like he was fighting with someone internally. I noticed something else though, something that I couldn't ignore. It was a silence. Many practitioners I respected found it hard to say anything other than what they'd learned through FP. These are thoughtful, capable people who either didn't speak publicly or market themselves in a way that was any different to the FP marketing narrative. I felt like I was stuck in an echo chamber of cynicism and anger at the fitness industry. At times, I even felt like I was sat on a pedestal, looking down upon the fitness industry and all the modalities that come along with it, criticizing bigger platforms, thinking they simply were just ignorant sellouts. I even made a video ranting about it. I found myself becoming a miserable old Scrooge. I ignored these feelings for a long time, and I told myself that the results justified the discomfort, that progress required friction. I told myself that I was just being dysfunctional for wanting to do more than just functional patterns. But eventually I had to face an uncomfortable truth. Something that helped heal my body was costing me my happiness, my openness, and my perspective. That conflict between gratitude and unease is what this video is really about. The moment things shifted from discomfort to clarity wasn't dramatic, it was cumulative. You might be thinking, well, Brendan, you've been making content about functional patterns and still shared a positive perspective despite all of this. Well, yes, but all of my content on YouTube and social media has been carefully thought out. And I'll remind you that I often mentioned to ignore the marketing and focus on the modality itself. But I was always concerned about sticking to the FP narrative. Just over a year ago, that feeling of conflict within me caused me to want to pivot my YouTube content. The way I thought about it was, if I was going to stick to content about FP, why not promote it in a positive way? Why not be a positive force? And why not speak about the good that FP does instead of focusing on making content bashing other companies and modalities? I cast my mind back to 2015 when I started Raw Motion Fitness, and I was blogging. I was telling success stories of people who transformed their lives. And I figured, why not do that with functional patterns as the forefront, as the topic? So I lined up over 10 interviews with practitioners from around the world. These were thoughtful human discussions about why each practitioner had found functional patterns, what it helped them through, and what it meant to them to be a part of the FP ecosystem and community. To me, this felt like the most honest form of advocacy possible. There were no slogans and no memes. The most important thing for me was I was interviewing people that weren't the faces that you see marketing functional patterns on their main platforms, but people doing real work in the trenches with average people for clients, all with real lives. Out of all the 10 interviews that I lined up, I recorded 5 of them. And those 5 interviews that I recorded never went live. Not because they were inaccurate, not because the practitioners didn't stand by what they said in those interviews, but because once FP had become aware of them, the practitioners involved were made to feel so uncomfortable about being in those videos that they asked me not to publish them. It wasn't out of disagreement, but it was out of fear for the consequences of them talking about functional patterns in an unregulated way. That was the first time that I stopped and I thought to myself, why would authentic stories about functional patterns be a problem? After this, I started to notice a trend online with social media accounts started multiplying. Reaction content became a prominent feature of their marketing message. Meme pages were being created by leading practitioners, targeting entire segments of the fitness industry and making fun of people. Public ridicule became the strategy for FP marketing. I watched people asking genuine questions get dismissed, or told to do the 10-week course, or pay for a practitioner, sometimes even getting mocked or psychoanalyzed with very little justification or context. At the same time, FP policies existed that explicitly discouraged this kind of behavior. That contradiction was and is hard to ignore. The moment that finally crossed the line for me was personal. After outlining my intention to build an educational course, which I'm still building, by the way, one that didn't teach FP exercises, it did not replicate FP material, and was designed to complement my coaching and peripheral support for my clients, I received messages telling me to stop. I received emails which followed, and the tone wasn't curious. It wasn't collaborative. It felt threatening. Now, I want to be very clear here. I'm not talking about an open discourse and a conversation about what I was doing. I'm talking about official and unofficial communication from FP and those people in FP that felt more than threatening. I need to make this abundantly clear as well. I'm not an employee of Functional Patterns. I do not represent FP on a salary. I run my own business, and I'm an independently qualified and insured PT in the UK. FP certifications don't govern my professional legitimacy, nor do they actually hold any weight in the UK. And yet suddenly, it felt as though my thinking, my voice, my development needed permission. That was the moment something inside of me snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. I realized that staying quiet would require me to shrink parts of myself that mattered. It would require me to give up my curiosity, to give up my openness, and to challenge my own integrity. Staying aligned would mean accepting behavior that I wouldn't even tolerate in any other professional environment. It wasn't a fight that I wanted, and it was a line that I couldn't ignore. Now, I'm always and have always been a principles-oriented person. Now, FP talks a lot about principles and semantics, and how communication matters, how science is the bottom line. And yet all the messaging, marketing, and communication often feels threatening, abstract, and dogmatic. This wasn't about FP as a methodology anymore. It was about whether I could remain honest with myself while staying inside the ecosystem. Ultimately, it felt like in order to do FP, you had to be part of an ideology too. We know how ideologies can gather momentum over time, right? So at the beginning of the video, I said that I was pain-free, but there were still some issues. After many hours of FP and time spent tackling my pelvic pain, I noticed a shift in my pain. At first, the pelvic floor improved, and after that, my left hamstring started playing up. But the pelvic floor pain went away. Then the hamstring and the pelvic floor were fine, but I noticed intense pulling under the back of my left ribs. This pulling lasted some time and then eventually went away. After that, what followed was a complete intolerance to caffeine and salty foods. I found that every time I ate bacon or drank a coffee, I would end up with crippling anxiety and my blood pressure would go up. It got to the point where I ended up in hospital with my blood pressure being 200 over 160. This unexplained blood pressure issue seemed to all start in late 2022, and ever since then, my doctors believe this was down to a rare adrenal tumor called a pheochromocytoma. After countless urine tests and over 3 years of back and forth with the doctors here in the UK, I managed to get myself an MRI in June of 2025 to assess my kidney. At this stage, I was having issues where every time I trained and my heart rate went above zone 2, my blood pressure would stay high regardless of medication, and it would stay high for the rest of the day, and the pulling in my left ribs would come back. Upon receiving the results and the consultation, I was told that there was no adrenal tumor and that I was back to square one. That was until I read my MRI report. There it was, in the middle of the report, a line saying large hiatus hernia. At that moment, I knew that I'd figured out all my issues. I got on the phone to one of my clients and a good friend who is able to read and understand these scans, being a gastroenterologist. And I got him to assess my MRI. And let's just say that the pictures did not disappoint. Since then, I have been on a surgical roadmap with tests to assess the scale and scope of the hernia. But I have seen the latest scans after my barium swallow, and let's just say that 50% of my stomach is stuck in my chest and can't come back through my diaphragm. Side note, with that barium swallow, ever since then, I've had ridiculously unwell symptoms. I just feel horrendous, by the way. So anyone getting a barium swallow, just be mindful that you could have a reaction. Now, for those who don't know what a hiatus hernia is, this is how it has affected me. When a large hiatus hernia allows a significant portion of the stomach to move up through the diaphragm into the chest, it stops being a digestive issue and it starts to become a whole body mechanical issue. The stomach interferes with the diaphragm and restricts the breathing patterns. It irritates the vagus nerve and it alters the pressure around the heart and the lungs. In my case, my stomach is sitting next to my heart. This can show up as breathlessness during exercise, poor tolerance to higher heart rates, chest tightness, palpitations, anxiety, or adrenaline surges without a clear mental trigger, disrupted sleep, reflux, nausea, and unstable blood pressure. Essentially, anything that increases intra-abdominal pressure, such as running, training, bracing, coughing, large meals, or even just bending down to tie my shoelaces, can force my stomach further into my chest and amplify my symptoms. Now, I believe that certain aspects of my functional patterns training over the years, particularly with prolonged bracing strategies and aggressive changes in my core tensions, have repeated the process of increasing intra-abdominal pressure without adequate diaphragmatic excursion. And this may have contributed to the hernia becoming larger and more symptomatic over time. In my case, this combination of mechanical pressure and nervous system stress significantly affects my training capacity, my breathing patterns, my anxiety, and my recovery. I've put a link down in the description where you can read a lot more detail about how this works and the specific issues that it can create. But all of this is to say that I have, for the last year, been focused on shifting my own fitness training. I've taken elements of FP and brought that knowledge into my training. The reality is that I'm in zero pain, but I can't really train and I can't train hard or often. And whatever fitness I had from 2024 is completely gone. Anytime that I find a rhythm or some consistency in my training and practice, I will invariably end up creating a negative nervous system response. This is a very important piece of this video because I'm not the only person who has had this exact same issue arise after doing FP for a period of time. Before I say anything else, I need to be clear about this. Walking away from functional patterns as a practitioner is not the same as rejecting all the things that I've learned through functional patterns. Nor does it mean that I will stop crediting them for the methods and techniques that I use where applicable. This distinction matters. I still believe the methodology is powerful. I still believe that the results are real. I am living proof that my body is pain-free. My body may still be dysfunctional, and I still have issues, whether they're created by doing extra FP or not. I don't think you're ever going to be able to prove that personally. I just think that my movement awareness is on a completely different level to where it was years ago. Functional patterns has taught me to think in systems instead of parts. It taught me to respect tension, understand more about movement and movement sequences, and it helped me to slow down to observe and stop outsourcing responsibility for my body unless absolutely necessary. Those lessons don't disappear just because I've chosen to step away from the ecosystem. I still use many of the principles in my coaching. I still teach new clients how to stand better, how to move with intention. I still value the idea that strength without structure is fragile. I still challenge their behaviors, their dysfunctions. The difference is that I accept the nuances to coaching and teaching people is a process. I also believe that any top-level brand or coaching practice needs to provide value online that encourages a positive relationship for their followers. If you look at the fitness industry, it seems that the trend of dogmatism, argument, and disdain for anything against the influencer in question is wrong. You can go online today and watch 5 videos about why vegetables are bad, another 5 about why they're good. You'll see videos about why they ruin the planet and so on. So much so that the person looking for help is forced to either sit in an echo chamber or remain completely lost and confused. This is so wrong. It seems that the mainstream narrative on social media to grab attention, sell products, and make money is to say outrageous and insulting things to pull people in and push others away. Honestly, I thought the whole point of being scientific was not to be dogmatic, to be open to criticism and accept being challenged. What I no longer believe is that a methodology needs to become an identity. I don't believe curiosity should be punished. I don't believe disagreement is disloyalty. I don't believe results justify behavior. And I don't believe people in pain should feel afraid to ask questions or be judged. For the average person looking for help, here's what I would say. If you commit to the functional patterns courses, focus simply on the material and apply it patiently. FP can genuinely help you, but you don't need to absorb the surrounding noise to get the benefits. In fact, I would even go as far as to say, distance yourself from the online culture to protect your mental health. For coaches and practitioners, I believe this. FP is a tool, a very powerful tool. It should remain a tool, not a belief system and not a hierarchy, and not a test of loyalty. The best coaches I know in any discipline are the ones who keep learning, questioning, and integrating, not the ones who defend a single framework at all costs. I'm grateful for what FP has given me, but staying would require me to ignore parts of myself that I value more than belonging. And that's a price that I'm no longer willing to pay. I've said this a few times in this video, and I want to round up with this because the things I'm going to say sit at the heart of why I'm stepping away, and they're ideas that go far beyond functional patterns. The first idea is this: you cannot be scientific and dogmatic at the same time. Science is a method. It is provisional. It evolves. It invites challenge, refinement, and revision. The moment a system becomes too immune to questioning, when dissent is framed as ignorance or disloyalty, it stops being scientific, no matter how strong its original foundations were. That doesn't mean the ideas are wrong. It means the relationship to the ideas have changed. The second idea is more subtle, but just as important. There is a fine line between high-quality knowledge and high-quality application of knowledge. Knowing something is not the same as understanding it. Repeating something accurately is not the same as applying it wisely. Samuel Taylor Coleridge spoke about this in his classifications of readers. At the lowest levels, there are those who simply repeat what they read. Higher up are those who can explain what they read. Higher still are those who can interpret what they read. And at the highest level are those who can use it creatively, independently, and responsibly. Much of what I've seen within functional patterns community and within its people sits somewhere uncomfortably between all those levels. People can quote concepts flawlessly and they can repeat language precisely, but regurgitation is not mastery, and precision of words does not guarantee precision of thought or action. In coaching people, this matters more than anything, mainly because clients don't experience theories. They experience outcomes. They experience how safely they are guided, how clearly they're taught, how adaptable the coach is when something doesn't work, and how much room there is for curiosity rather than compliance. Over time, I realized that staying aligned would require me to prioritize loyalty over discernment and repetition over integration. That's not how I coach, that's not how I learn, and that's not how I live. Stepping away isn't rejection, it's integration. I'm taking what works, I'm leaving what didn't, and I'm choosing to remain accountable to my clients, not to an ideology. This isn't a warning for anyone. It's an orientation. If functional patterns helps you, then use it. If it challenges you, good. If it challenges your principles, question it. And if it ever asks you to stop thinking for yourself, then pause. That pause is where responsibility lives. That's why I'm stepping away. I'm not leaving functional patterns because it didn't work, and I refuse to let something that helped me stop me from thinking for myself. Take what strengthens you, leave what doesn't. And never outsource your judgment, especially when your body, your health, and your integrity are on the line. Stay strong and keep moving.